Let's talk to Mal Fletcher. Mal Fletcher, who is a social commentator. Good morning to you, Mal.
Good morning, Mike.
Is this fair enough then, this list being published at 11 o'clock?
Look, I think there are some important privacy issues at stake. We can't have a situation where the income of key BBC people is an exercise in salacious gossip mongering. But having said that, the BBC is a public entity. It's a public service organisation. The current revelations, as I understand them, will refer only to people who earn more than the Prime Minister, more than £150,000 a year. It seems fair to people who earn more than the PM and are supported from the public purse should expect at least the same level of scrutiny. Ethically speaking, the greater the level of public support, the higher should be the level of transparency, because with power comes responsibility.
And should we extend this? A couple of texters this morning saying this should be extended to all public employees.
Well, I don't see the need for it with people who earn, relatively low salaries, and there are a lot of those who work within the public sector. But I do see it for people at the top. I mean, you think about corporations. We are shareholders in the BBC in much the same way that individuals are shareholders in big corporations, and the top earners there are expected to declare their income. And private companies, let's remember, don't enjoy the kind of near monopoly in some of their markets that the BBC does. What's more, they're subject to all kinds of risks that the BBC doesn't face, like the risk of bankruptcy, for one. So I think it's a thing that applies differently to different public as distinct from private enterprises.
But couldn't it benefit low-paid workers if we knew how little they got?
Well, it might, as a class of people. If you're saying that the bottom earner gets X as a class, but if you talk about individuals, I don't think there's any benefit. And we're not looking really for, as I said, salacious gossip about top stars at the BBC. We don't want to, and we shouldn't make it a personal thing. But as a matter of how much is paid at that level, I think that's important. What the classes are, the categories are, rather than the individuals.
And if a newsreader or a big star at the BBC, in your opinion, earns a fortune, it could be more than $1 million in one or two cases, should the BBC let that person go?
Not necessarily. I think there'd need to be some discussion about whether they would develop adding the sort of value that is reflected in that wage structure. I mean, that's an enormous amount of money, and we have to think what pressures are on those people, what risks are they taking, how much value is being added to the public that couldn't be added by someone paid a lot less. That's the big question. It's an economic question. It's not a personal question.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody who used to work in broadcasting around about 20 minutes ago, and she's worked at the BBC and in the commercial sector as well. And she is of the view that if somebody is earning a lot of money at the BBC, let them go. Let them go and let, younger talent come through.
Well, I certainly think there's a case for that if the individual is not adding value that can't be added by somebody else. It's a bit like the old immigration laws, which said if you can't bring somebody if you can't find somebody locally to do the job, then you can bring someone in to do it. And I think that applies here. When you look at companies like ITV, for example, it's not supported by the public's purse. It has to abide by all the strict laws regulating broadcasters and company law generally, but it does not call upon us for its economic lifeblood, so it shouldn't necessarily be held to the same degree of transparency in that area as the BBC.
And do you think if we knew how much everybody got paid, not just talking about the BBC, but everybody, because we're hopeless at talking about money in this country, Mel, I think, do you think there would be some surprises? For example, do you think people would be surprised by how much a mainline train driver earns?
Yeah, there may be some surprises, and that one's been brought up in the press recently, hasn't it? That specific example.
Yeah, it's about 60,000.
Yeah, well, that's a good wage, I would think. Mind you, you have to argue too that train driver is responsible for a lot of people. So you expect, and they're not the same thing. You couldn't match a train driver with an airline pilot, but you pay an airline pilot a lot of money, hopefully, because they are well trained and they're responsible for so many people's lives. So you have to weigh that up as well. I think there'd be some surprises. I don't think we should apply it across the board, but when it's public purse money and there are top earners above the Prime Minister's